Hello YouTubers, this is the noobifier. Kyle and I spent 5 days over I just spent the last, 6 minutes recording audio, going crazy, trying to figure out why the microphone sounded like ass. And as it turns out, I had it facing the wrong way. So, hello YouTubers, this is the noobifier, round 2. Kyle and I spent 5 days on an install near Washington, D.C., USA. Let me break down this truly epic build for you. We normally try very hard to not dox our clients, so as usual, the clients are simply going to be known as R and S. S was researching simulator solutions for R. S had watched a previous video and suggested that maybe a cubic system might be the solution that R was looking for. So we had a conference call and I quickly got to know what the needs were. R had just bought a brand new SimLabs-based static sim platform and wanted to add motion to it, but because R also owns and flies real planes and real helicopters, that then became a second request, a second system. Just to be clear at the start, R loves cars, planes, and choppers, and I think he has what I consider to be the nicest, most balanced collection of all of these. We can build a highly customizable platform with easy quick change between car, chopper, and plane, but R decided that he would much prefer if he would be able to focus on 2 separate systems so both could be used at the same time, or more importantly, there would be no need to swap anything around when switching. And obviously it's still possible for him to quickly reconfigure either of them to quickly become a second plane or a second car if that's what he needs at the time. R had the space available and everyone agreed that this would be a super addition to his garage. The systems would reside on the second floor mezzanine of what was a coach house that R had remodeled to become a super cool man cave and garage. His coach house began as a triple garage with very high ceilings. R then added a hoist in the middle bay, and then he added a full service bar, a TV, and all of that would have nice scattering of cars, but a little bit more perhaps on that later. The space was completely updated by R, and as I said, the perfect man cave garage, which would be better with the addition of some high-end simulators. After a couple more short calls, the basic plan was taking shape. Originally, R was interested in the QSS-25, but we decided that a pair of CH2-based systems was actually what he needed and would be more suited for the location. The driving rig would be based on that SimLabs rig with many mods, and the new dedicated flight rig would be based on the modular MonsterTech MTS. MTS has modules for all of these situations, and if you had seen the review for QSS-35, you would have seen right at the start that I love my time racing with my dad, which is only possible with the second system. So R is able to capitalize on this as well. Virpil was selected for the helicopter gear, the controls and motion systems were ordered. After everything arrived, bags were packed, flights and hotels and rentals were booked. We began day 0 with a short flight from Ottawa to Dulles. When we landed, we got our bags quickly, got the shuttle to the rental. We were on the road and to the hotel shortly. We checked in with R to say that everything was good for day 1 and that we would meet up at 8 a.m. the next day. So supper, shower, bed, and upper 7 day 1. Kyle and I met for breakfast at the hotel and we hit the road to meet R and got the lay of the land. We confirmed the build location, we confirmed what angles may or may not be okay for photography, where would be okay and where would not be okay to go in the house. We also did a quick scan of the parts and then we got to work. R confirmed that videos and photos was okay in general as long as nobody could see license plates. Kyle and I love cars, but neither of us had seen a collection, a personal collection like this. Each car in his collection is not only special and unique, but also has a special story. For example, you might see a car that is a low production number and rare, but be the last or first production number in the production line, or have a unique finish or a very rare interior upholstery. Kyle and I had no experience with this specific SimLabs platform, so we took the time to remove the floor plating and took a detailed look. After 5 minutes of measuring and discussion, we were 100% certain that with a little bit of modification, that this would be compatible with the cubic system that R bought. With the tape measure in hand, it was clear that we could fabricate a set of mounting bars for the power cabinets. We wanted to get at least the first CH2 up into the mezzanine before the end of the first day. There's no nice way to say this. Lifting a CH2 upstairs sucked, even with lifting straps and gloves. We raised it onto its casters to make it easy to move around and to work on. Then we lifted and placed the SimLabs platform over the CH2 to get a sense of where the actuators would mount and what other steps would need to be done. It was around that time that we realized that we were missing some parts, and that would all be sorted out after a couple hours of phone calls. We adjusted the work plan and used the last parts of the first day to assemble the MTS system, which would be needed early in the next day. Day 1 ends with a quick cleanup, dinner, hotel, shower bed up at 7, then shower, breakfast, day 2 begins at 8 o'clock, and we immediately lift up the second CH2 with all of the same swearing. MTS pilot seat was attached to the MTS base, and then we fully stripped down the SimLab setup even further and refined the plan better to mount the control cabinets below. Before lunch, I switched my focus onto building the PC, and Kyle always jokes that the PC is always a time sink. We always need to build it on the first day so that we don't get bricked, and we didn't do that, and of course the PC becomes a problem. There would be an AM5 socketed Asus B650 with a 7950X3D. R opted for a 4080 Super. We added a terabyte for system and a 2 terabyte for library, and then a 360mm all-in-one cooler, 1200 watt power supply, and all of that's within a Corsair case. In the future, if we're asked to build a PC, I might actually consider assembling and installing the PC parts in my studio and then hand carrying it in checked baggage. Let's see how TSA likes that one. Kyle was able to fabricate a new shifter mount out of the old one. He needed to build it in a manner that it wouldn't conflict with where the actuators would need to be mounted. To support the 2 control cabinets below the driving sim, we would need to build a ladder out of aluminum profile, and all of this fabrication to convert the SimLabs was quite time consuming, but overall, the results ended up being super. Also, the SimLab system requires a little bit more flexibility to enter and exit, like you need to stretch or something. R then got his plasma table out and ready, and we really wanted to test and use that later on day 3. After a quick cleanup, dinner, hotel shower, back up at 7 for breakfast. Day 3, on-site for 8 o'clock. We began by cutting the vertical supports that hold the wheel in place. The original triple mount that is attached to that on the SimLabs platform would actually never survive motion. It would just jiggle and flop around and break everything. There was a current plan for VR and a single 55-inch screen for spectators. The PC was finally remedied, and we were able to install and update Windows, install a second copy of Steam, and then let the games download overnight. Most of the remainder of that day was devoted to wiring, finishing up the placement of the flight controls on the second system, firmware, and checks. Power cabinets were both secured to both systems in preparation for the missing mounts that would arrive the next day. Clean up, hotel, breakfast at 7 the next day, on-site at 8. Steam was successful in installing the titles that we needed. I updated the chipset and graphic drivers, checked for Windows updates. Kyle scored the floor plates where they would need to be cut to clear around the actuators, and a little bit more modification that he wanted to apply. We bolted the actuator mounts to the platform, and this part went very smoothly because of all of the preparation that Kyle had invested before. Kyle measured 3 times and attached once to get within a 0.5 millimeter of alignment. It's critical to get the 4 actuators to rest perfectly centered within the 4 actuator cups because it'll result in as little awkward behavior during very violent operation, aka less bucking. If your system bucks, then someone hasn't set it up properly. With each system now resting above its respective CH2, we were able to power cycle the system, apply firmware, and then perform a full range function test. Things were starting to look really good near the end of day 4, but as the sun was setting, all eyes were on the plasma table. We could have probably made the needed cuts with a Sawzall, but curiosity and the desire to test is real. Some test cuts were done, and that proved that the compressor needed its own circuit, and then Kyle and R made the needed cuts to the floor plate. A quick scrub of the cut edge, and then some treatment with a paint pen to protect the newly exposed metal. The final result of all of this work is actually very hard to detect unless someone specifically points it out. The cubic actuators sit perfectly wrapped within the modified floor plate on each side. It looks awesome. With each system operating and being 9 p.m., we cleaned up, got supper, hotel, up for 7 on final day. Day 5 began at 8 like normal, but we had cleared out of the hotel because our flight would be 10 o'clock that night. Final testing, adjusting some cable management, and final placement of the systems within the room. The 55-inch TVs were set to the correct height, and as the saying goes, we have no idea where the rest of that day went. The final day is supposed to be about cleanup and handover, but we had to go through 2, so we ran out of time, and we had a plan to return in a month for a solo visit. Eventually, we approached 7 p.m., which was the cutoff to safely make it in time for our flights. We said goodbye for now, dropped off the rental, and made our way to the departure gate, and that would normally be where the end of the video was, with some kind of uplifting outro, but the story's not done. R then contacted me with some questions, and we had planned for an expanded set of features. Specifically, he wanted to be able to switch between helicopter and fighter jet. This resulted in that second visit being planned, but I wouldn't go with Kyle this time. It was a solo trip. Before I left, R had ordered a full set of new flight controls for F-18, and I had fabricated a new set of custom mounts that would quickly switch between helicopter that was already assembled and this new capability. So with everything ready, I flew back to Washington, picked up a new rental car, and made my way to a new hotel. There was a cold spell with evenings dipping below 34 degrees Celsius, which is like minus 29 Fahrenheit. It was therefore super lucky that the rental ended up being a brand new BMW 3 Series with xDrive. Believe it or not, one of the main things that I wanted to address was that R had all Fanatec gear, and those wires from the base to all of the extras are RJ12, which look like a network or phone wire, but has only 6 leads instead of 4 or 8. Because his driving sim had everything below floorboards, none of the stock wires were long enough to do a clean install, so it was a bit of a rat's nest when we left the last time. In about the first 10 minutes of day 1, these had their own custom length wires, and they were all managed and perfectly hidden. More of day 1 was spent working on the quick change between heli and jet. R had bought X-Plane, so we also took the time to get the bindings for both plane and choppers dialed in for that. R's friend, who will be known as B, was over throughout many of the days, and he ended up offering his services to be a test pilot for the systems in VR. Day 2 would actually take me to another customer's location, one that I haven't spoken about. That customer had us install a QSS-25, but the overall angular range was not enough to provide the customer with a sustained G-force that they were expecting. So I was asked to spend one day disassembling that and preparing that to be shipped. A completely different job. I plan to incorporate that into its own video, and later Kyle and I would be asked to fly to California to reassemble that system somewhere else. So, day 3 was back into R's garage. He wanted a mousepad surface and a keyboard for his driving sim. He wanted help to ensure that the VR would work on either and both of the systems. I addressed some more cable management, some squeaks that had manifested, and the time spent with R to do a proper handover this time that was cut short on our last trip. Overall, a super cool double install in a great location. R had done all of the prep work to make sure that the electrical in the mezzanine was up to the task. The second trip allowed me to put extra polish on both of his systems, address some things that became more obvious after the install, and of course, spend more time with R. R is planning to fly up to see the new studio this fall. He's super busy within the flight community and actually called from Oshkosh this year to tell me how awesome it was, and also remind me how sorry he was that he had taken so long to call back, which is super nice. We meet the best people on all of these installs, and I will be happy to report back in the future with his impressions of QSS-35 Extreme Envelope 6DOF when he comes to visit. Thank you so much for spending your time with me. If you're in the market for such a thing, or perhaps you just want to discuss if what you want can be built or if it's even possible, the contact info for Discord and email are in the description. SimSafe.